Now we will talk about the pulse. It is a series of pressure waves. Now this pulse is a series of pressure waves that travel through the arteries due to the ventricular systole. When the blood is pumped out of the heart through the ventricles, when the ventricles contract during the ventricular systole, when the ventricles contract, at that time the blood is pumped out of the heart. So that pressure of the pumping of the blood, that pressure of the blood, it creates a pressure waves in the arteries, and this is called as the pulse. This pressure wave is called as the pulse. Strongest in the arteries and closer to the heart. So this pressure wave or this pulse, it is strongest in the arteries which are closer to the heart, which are situated closer to the heart, and it is weaker in the arteries which are away from the heart. This pulse is weaker in the arteries which are away from the heart. It can be felt easily in superficial arteries like radial arteries in the wrist and carotid arteries in the neck. Now in previous parts we have seen where these arteries are situated. Radial arteries are situated in your wrist region here, and carotid arteries are situated in your neck region. So whenever you touch these points, at that time you can feel the pressure of the blood, you can feel your pulse. So it can easily be felt in the superficial arteries. These arteries are situated superficially, not deeply near the bone. So that's why we can feel the pulse in it. Also, it can be felt in particular points on the body. So these are the points in your body where you can feel the pulse. The temporal region, the facial region, the carotid artery which I said about near the neck. When you touch here, you can feel the pulse of the blood flow. So here carotid artery, carotid region, brachial region, radial region. This radial artery, brachial artery is here in your arm. Here also if you touch here, you can feel the pulse. Femoral region, also popliteal region, posterior tibial region, and dorsal pedis region. These are the points in your body, on your body, where you can feel the pulse. Now the pulse rate is equal to the heart rate. Heart rate, we know, when one contraction is followed by one relaxation, that is the heartbeat or heart rate. One systole is followed by the diastole, that is the heartbeat, and so in 1 minute how many times the heart beats? That is 72 times. So that is the heart rate. Per minute, how many times the heart beats per minute? That is the heart rate. So pulse rate is equal to the heart rate. Pulse rate is higher than normal. When the pulse rate is higher than normal, that is above 100 beats per minute, then this condition, this situation is called as tachycardia. And when it is slower, the pulse rate is slower than normal, below 60 beats per minute, it is called as brachycardia. When the pulse rate is above 100 beats per minute, when your heart beats about 100 times per minute, at that time that situation is called as tachycardia. Whereas the pulse rate, when the heart beats 60 times per minute, is below, pulse rate is below than the normal, then it is called as bradycardia. So the pulse, it is a series of pressure waves that travel through the arteries due to the ventricular systole. When the ventricles contract, the systole occurs. At that time, the blood which is pumped out of the heart, that blood creates a pressure waves in the arteries, and those are called as the pulse. Now we will discuss about the blood pressure. Blood pressure is the pressure exerted by the blood on the walls of the blood vessels. Now as we know, the blood passes through the blood vessels. So the pressure which the blood exerts on the walls of those blood vessels is called as the blood pressure. It is measured by sphygmomanometer. The device which is used to measure the blood pressure is called as sphygmomanometer. It is usually measured from the arteries. The blood pressure normally it is measured from the arteries. Arterial blood pressure. The pressure exerted by the blood on the walls of the artery is called as arterial blood pressure. So, the blood pressure which is exerted by the blood on the walls of the artery is called as the arterial blood pressure. Pressure on the arterial wall during the ventricular contraction is called as systolic blood pressure. So, the pressure which is exerted by the blood on the arterial wall during the ventricular contraction, when the ventricles contract, at that time the pressure that is exerted by the blood on the walls of the arteries, that pressure is called as systolic blood pressure. As we know, contraction is also called as systole. So, this pressure is called as systolic blood pressure. The normal healthy adult has about average of 120 millimeters of Hg. The blood pressure is the average of 120 millimeters of mercury. So, in a normal adult, the value of the blood pressure is about 120 millimeters of mercury. The pressure on the arterial wall during the ventricular relaxation is called as diastolic blood pressure. Now, the pressure which is exerted by the blood during the ventricular relaxation is also called as diastole. So, the pressure which is exerted by the blood when the ventricles relax, at that time that pressure is called as diastolic blood pressure. When the contraction is there, it is called as systolic blood pressure, and during the relaxation it is called as diastolic blood pressure. Normal healthy adult has the value of about 80 millimeters of mercury. The blood pressure value of normal adult diastolic blood pressure is about 80 millimeters of mercury. So, normally it is written as blood pressure is equal to systolic blood pressure oblique diastolic blood pressure. So, that is 120 oblique 80 millimeters of mercury. So, the difference between the systolic pressure and the diastolic pressure is called as the pulse pressure. The difference between the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure is called as pulse pressure, and normally it is about 40 millimeters of mercury. The difference is about 40 millimeters of mercury. The deviations from normal blood pressure value indicate the malfunctioning of the heart. The changes in the normal blood pressure value that indicate the malfunctioning of the heart. It indicates whether the heart is functioning properly or if there is a malfunction in the heart. So, this may be due to the high or low blood pressure. It may be due to high or low blood volume, the arterial inelasticity, hardening of arteries. Now, this malfunctioning of the heart or the deviation or the changes in the blood pressure value, it may be because of the high or low blood volume. The volume of the blood may be high or low. Because of that also the changes in the blood pressure value can be seen, or it can be seen due to arterial inelasticity. Now, during the arteries, while understanding the structure of arteries, we have understood that the middle layer of the arteries, the tunica media, it has smooth muscle fibers and they are elastic. So, the elasticity of the arteries depend on those muscle fibers. If those muscle fibers are not working properly, so inelasticity may occur here. So, arterial inelasticity may be also a reason for the change in the blood pressure value. and that is also called as hardening of arteries. As the blood pressure is more, the arteries, they stretch, these muscles, they stretch, they increase the lumen so that the blood can flow easily. So, and if it becomes inelastic or the arteries become hard, so the blood will resist to flow from that lumen. That is called as arteriosclerosis. This condition is called as arteriosclerosis, that is hardening of arteries. The deposition of fats like cholesterol in the arteries. Now fats get deposited in the lumen of the arteries, that is called as atherosclerosis. It is called as the atherosclerosis. Renal diseases, that is diseases related to kidneys, emotion-induced hormonal changes and obesity. These may be the factors because of which the normal blood pressure value can be changed, or changes may occur in the normal blood pressure value. The blood pressure lower than normal, that is below 90/60 millimeters of mercury, that is called as hypotension. When the blood pressure is lower than the normal value, it is called as hypotension. And when the blood pressure is higher than the normal value, that is 140 to 90 millimeters of mercury, that is called as hypertension. Various factors affect the blood pressure, that is cardiac output, peripheral resistance, blood volume, length and diameters of the blood vessels, viscosity of the blood, age, gender, venous return, sleep, emotions, exercise and anxiety. So all these factors, they affect the blood pressure. Cardiac output, the total volume of the output, the total volume of the blood which we get, which is pumped out of the blood, out of the heart per minute, that is the cardiac output. Peripheral resistance, the resistance of the blood, the resistance which is faced by the blood while flowing through the blood vessels, that is called as peripheral resistance. The periphery of the blood vessels, it resists the blood to flow, that is the peripheral resistance. Blood volume, the volume of the blood, length and the diameter of the blood vessels. The length and the diameter of the blood vessels are also the factors because of which the blood pressure can be affected. Also viscosity of the blood, the thickness of the blood, age, gender, venous return, sleep, emotions and exercise and anxiety. These are the factors which can affect the blood pressure. The normal cardiac output is 5 liters per minute. Normal cardiac output, normally per minute the how much blood is given out or pumped out of the heart, that is the normal cardiac output, and it is 5 liters per minute. So the cardiac output increases as the increase in systolic blood pressure. If the cardiac output increases, the systolic blood pressure also increases. The peripheral resistance depends upon the diameter of the blood vessels. So the diameter of the blood vessels affect the flow of the blood, that is peripheral resistance. If the diameter is small, the blood will there will be a resistance in the flow of the blood. So that is the peripheral resistance. Decrease in the diameter of the arterioles and capillaries under the effect of vasoconstrictor like vasopressin or ADH cause the increase in blood pressure. Now the vasoconstrictors which constrict the diameters of the arterioles and the capillaries. Suppose if the diameter of the arterioles is bigger, but due to the secretion of these vasoconstrictors, the diameter is reduced. So this may be a factor due to which the blood pressure increases. Because the diameter is low, the blood will flow with high pressure. So that's why if the diameter decreases, the blood pressure will increase. The blood loss in accidents decrease in blood volume, and thus the blood pressure also decreases. When there is a blood loss during the accidents, the volume of the blood in the body also decreases, and this causes the decrease in blood pressure. Blood pressure is directly proportional to the viscosity of the blood. Blood pressure is directly proportional to the viscosity of the blood. If the blood is thicker, it will resist to flow. The resistance of the flow will be more. And if the blood is thinner, it will flow easily. So the blood pressure is directly proportional to the viscosity of the blood. If the viscosity of the blood increases, the blood pressure will also increase, and if the viscosity decreases, the blood pressure will also decrease. The increase in blood pressure is due to age, due to increase in the inelasticity of the blood vessels. Increase in blood vessels according to the age, due to the increase in inelasticity of the blood vessels. Now, as the age increases, the elasticity of the blood vessel also decreases. So, this increases the blood pressure. The blood vessels start to become hard, and that's why the blood pressure also increases. Amount of blood brought to the heart with the help of the veins, via veins, per unit time is called as the venous return. So, the amount of blood which is brought by the veins to the heart in per unit time, in a particular unit time, that is called as venous return. Venous return is directly proportional to the blood pressure. If the venous return increases, the blood pressure will also increase. If the venous return decreases, the blood pressure will decrease. Blood pressure is also directly proportional to the total length of the blood vessels. How long the blood vessels are. So, the blood pressure is directly proportional to the length of the blood vessels. If the blood vessels are long, the blood will take more time to flow through those vessels, and accordingly the pressure, if it reaches from one end to the other end, accordingly the pressure will become low. Blood pressure can be affected by the vasoconstriction or vasodilation. Females have lower blood pressure than males. Now, her age before the menopause. Now, suppose if the age of the male is 34 and the same age is of the female 34. So, at that time what happens, or whatever age you can take, at this time what happens, before the menopause and after the menopause, there is a high risk of increase in blood pressure. Now, before the menopause what happens, females have periods every month. So, due to that, blood loss takes place in the body. So, that causes the blood pressure to low blood pressure. Whereas, after the menopause, the blood loss is decreased, blood is not lost. So, what happens, that blood remains in the body only. And because of that, the resistance of the blood flow in the blood vessels is more, and the vessels are not used to that resistance. So that's why the increase in blood pressure occurs. The blood pressure increases, or there is a high risk in the blood pressure in the females after